let the torch of freedom burn.
This is the intersection of faith and the culture. It's WallBuilders Live, and we're talking about today's hottest topics from a biblical worldview, also applying a constitutional and historical perspective. We think if you combine those three things in the American culture today, that's how you figure out how to be a good biblical citizen in modern America. My name is Rick Green. I'm a former Texas legislator and America's Constitution coach. I'm here with America's premier historian, David Barton. He's the founder of WallBuilders, and also Tim Barton, president of WallBuilders, is a national speaker and pastor. All three of us every day try to approach the hot issues of the day from that biblical, historical, and constitutional perspective and bring that information to you. It equips, it inspires, it gives people what they need to go out and be a good citizen and influence the culture in a positive way. This program happens because of listeners just like yourself, and as a listener-supported program, we are sure thankful for all of you across the nation that make those one-time and monthly donations at wallbuilderslive.com. You can do that today by clicking on the Contribute button and just pray about what's good for you, what's going to be a good donation you can make that's a good investment in freedom. It's a way to give of your life, your fortune, and your sacred honor to make sure that we preserve and pass the torch of freedom intact to the next generation. All right, guys, later in the program, the Reverend Dr. Marian Hatcher is going to be with us. We're talking about obviously the controversial issue of legalizing prostitution. There's several venues around the country, states, local cities that are pursuing this, and obviously the detrimental effects wherever it's been tried before. But, some folks are really advocating for this because they're saying, look, this is the oldest profession, which isn't true, actually. Gardening would be the oldest profession, right? I mean, that's what Adam, anyway.
It's valid.
David, Tim, but Marian will be with us here in a little while. But I thought that this DC push was, potentially going to go through, and they were going to be like Nevada.
Yeah.
Sorry for our friends in Nevada.
It looked like that, and certainly D.C. has been on the front edge of trying to do all sorts of goofy things. Goofy in the sense that they're trying to enact policies that just haven't worked elsewhere. They haven't worked in other places, but they tend to be part of the really progressive liberal thinking style. And, we need to try this because we're progressive liberals. Well, other progressive liberals have tried that in America, and it didn't work there. And they've actually had to back off. The policies they used to have in New York, they've backed away from. And a lot of the policies they had in Chicago, they've backed away from. And so it's like, I don't know, somehow D.C. thinks it needs to be the cutting-edge laboratory for things that haven't worked before. And many of those things we've been able to get knocked down. Part of that is because the Constitution makes sure that D.C. is not a state, that it is under the control of the federal government. And so Congress has an entire committee dedicated just to helping run D.C. It's government affairs, local government stuff. D.C. is under the federal government. Now, in, I think, 1968, the Congress gave D.C. the right to local self-rule. So they have a city council, they have a mayor, but the policies they come up with can be vetoed by Congress. Now, they're not going to be vetoed by Congress right now with Pelosi in charge, but things that they've tried to do is physician-assisted suicides. We're going to legalize suicides and et cetera. So things that would go against life, protection of unborn life, what they do with Planned Parenthood and what they do with so many other things. Been able to get a lot of those knocked down. But now you have D.C. saying, we're gonna become the Eastern Las Vegas, and the brothels and the brothel houses and the prostitution and open sex and paying for sex, et cetera. Now, everywhere that's gone on, I can take you all the way back to a Supreme Court case I was involved with back in the 80s, and the case was over whether we're going to have nude dancing establishments. In other words, dancing establishments with full nudity. And we were able to get that knocked down, not on a moral basis, but simply on the grounds that we're able to show the court that in every area that has accepted nude dancing establishments, in the communities around those establishments, the sexual crime rate goes up, the sexual assault rate goes up, crime in general goes up. I mean, it's just bad public policy because of what it produces. And so the court actually said, all right, no nude dancing establishments, not because of a moral issue, but because of a criminal justice issue. So there are consequences of this. And now here, decades later, you got Washington, D.C. trying to do the same thing. And so this really was intriguing to us. And there were some faith voices actually in D.C., some ministers stepping up to say, hey, this is a bad deal. This does not need to be done. And so we thought it'd be good to get an update from them, see what's going to happen with this new D.C. City Council policy, whether they're going to actually follow through on this, despite all the statistical evidence that's out there to the contrary. And if it's happening in D.C., it's probably going to come to a city near you at some point, because that means it's back on the table. There are now people pushing this again. There's a resurgence of this since the 1980s. And so this is just something good to be informed about.
Stay with us, folks. The Reverend Dr. Marian Hatcher will be with us to address this issue in a moment. This is someone that was delivered out of prostitution and is now an outspoken advocate for making sure it stays illegal, that prostitution stays illegal, and that these efforts in Washington, D.C. and some of these other states are defeated. Stay with us. You're listening to WallBuilders Live. Hey friends, Rick Green here from WallBuilders Live. What do Dennis Prager, Larry Elder, Ben Shapiro, Rick Green, Tim Barton, David Barton, what all these folks have in common other than the fact that they're conservative commentators that defend the Constitution and educate America on the Constitution? They're all raving about Front Sight Firearms Training Institute. In fact, if you go to my website right now today at rickgreen.com, you can watch the video of Dennis Prager training at Front Sight, or Larry Elder training at Front Sight, or Tim Barton and myself training out there at Front Sight. It's an opportunity for you to learn how to defend yourself and your family, to make sure that you're ready and able to do that. It is a fantastic place to train. They train literally 30,000, 40,000 people a year, and they're just wonderful to work with. And you can go with us. We're headed back out. We're going to have a great time out there as the WallBuilders family. And if you're a supporter of WallBuilders, we have an amazing deal for you. It's actually going to cost you 1/10 the normal price to attend this 2-day handgun training, because you're going with us, and you'll also get the Constitution crash course. I'll be teaching on the Constitution. You get the intellectual ammunition that you need to defend the Second Amendment and our Constitution, as well as getting the physical training on how to defend yourself and your family. And this is for everyone, guys, gals, everyone should take this class. No matter how much you've shot your whole life, or if you've never touched a gun, learn how to defend your family. We're going to be going several times throughout the year, and we would love to have you be a part of that. Check out rickgreen.com today to find out the dates and all the specifics and get all of your questions answered. Check out rickgreen.com today to join us on this Front Sight trip for both your constitutional and your handgun defense training. Welcome back to WallBuilders Live. Thanks for staying with us. Our special guest today is the Reverend Dr. Marian Hatcher. She is a national expert on anti-trafficking efforts and a recipient of the Presidential Lifetime Volunteer Achievement Award. Dr. Hatcher, thanks for your time today.
Oh, it's my privilege to join you.
Well, we had noticed that D.C., Washington, D.C., has an effort to decriminalize the sex trade, and saw your article about this and just wanted to get your thoughts on, can it be stopped? Should it be stopped? And do you see this happening across the country? But the most important question is, why not? Why not decriminalize the sex trade?
Well, first of all, we already won that particular battle. It is dead in the water.
Oh, for the D.C.
For the D.C. effort. It's dead in the water. Yes, praise God. It was.
Amen.
Definitely a challenge. Many voices came to the table to with the pros and cons, but fortunately, the survivor-led voices, the survivor leaders, the nonprofits that work in this area, and legislative support, we won the battle. However, this originated. The first major battle was in New York, and we won that battle. The second major, attempt to decriminalize the sex trade in total was, again, in D.C. We won that battle. There are, however, many, many other jurisdictions, including most recently Vermont, that have legislation pending to try to decriminalize the sex trade in total. I mean,
at the state level.
This is at the state level. That's correct. Yeah. So basically, we have 8 or 9 jurisdictions in the country that have either introduced legislation and lost, or have introduced legislation that's pending, or are strongly considering it. As a survivor myself, who experienced the violence and the degradation of prostitution and eventually being trafficked, I take it very seriously. Also, as a woman of strong faith, We don't take advantage of and build policy and legislation on the backs of the most vulnerable, which this is. Those who advocate for it did not want to be a quote-unquote sex worker at 7 years old. They wanted to be a teacher, a doctor, a policeman, things like that. These are people who, once they get to adulthood, decide this is something that they want to do, or someone who feels they have no other options, as many of our transgender sisters and brothers feel that there's no other option, which breaks my heart, because a person should not feel that selling their body is the only way to meet their basic needs and take care of themselves and their loved ones. Amen? So
Amen.
For me, the equality model, which has many other names. I mean, basically, you may have heard the sex buyer law, demand reduction model, Swedish model, Nordic model, abolitionist model, or partial decriminalization. You hear all these different, ways of putting it, but in the end, it's just a legal framework that decriminalizes those who are bought and sold in the sex trade, while providing support services that include exit strategies. I mean, we can't tell people that we want them to we want to support them to stop having to sell their bodies to meet their basic needs and be exploited by those who benefit from it, without providing them whole and healthy options and choices, right?
Yeah.
So, but it simultaneously holds accountable the sex buyers as well as the third-party exploiters, which includes pimps and brothel owners. So the whole concept, originated in Sweden in 1999, not only as a tool to combat sex trafficking, commercial exploitation, but also a way to promote gender equality.
Now, when you say the concept, you mean the decrim concept or another model that does actually
partial
work?
Decriminalization.
Partial
the whole
decrim.
Concept of legalization or decriminalization, as it has come along in many other places, other countries, has not worked in other countries. It's a disaster. It increases when you legalize or decriminalize, whichever way they want to flip that pancake, as they have done in Germany, Netherlands, and places. It increases your organized crime. It increases sex trafficking, because what happens is the demand goes up to the point where the voluntary supply can't meet that need, which means what? They're going to have to bring in supply against their will, right?
Interesting.
Which increases trafficking. The other thing is, it also increases organized crime in ways that people don't think of, in terms of increased narcotics, trafficking of weapons, all of this stuff. This is all very much connected. Criminal activity breeds criminal activity. And so with that said, let's stay here in the United States. We've had an unsuccessful 48-year science experiment in Nevada, in those few counties where it was legalized.
Right.
Same problem. Increased sex trafficking, including among children, increased organized crime, increased violence against women and girls and the transgender community. So why would
that's so interesting, because what you're saying is the very thing they're claiming that this policy change would decrease or get rid of, actually where they've had this policy change and made these things legal, the very things we wanted to get rid of went up.
Exactly.
Instead of going down. So you got more criminalization, you got more sex trafficking. So their claim is basically, how do they state their claim? So they are they basically saying that?
Well, they're saying it's more of a demand reduction, human rights, in my opinion, distorted human rights platform that basically says that people should be able to do what they want with their bodies. But in the end, if 98% of those people who are in the sex trade are saying that if given the opportunity to exit and do something different and be able to meet their basic needs another way, and 2% are saying that they want to exercise their human rights and they want to do whatever they want with their bodies, we can't build policy on that disproportionate type of a platform.
Oh, I got to stop you there and get you to say that again, because what I just heard you say is, look, when you see somebody get up and testify at a council hearing or at a legislative committee hearing saying, hey, I'm in the sex trade, I like what I'm doing, and I want it to be legal, that represents about 2% of those in the sex trade.
Exactly, because let's keep it real.
The 98% are saying, I want out.
Right, and guess what? That's why I have to use the platform the Lord has given me to be able to speak out, as well as many other survivor leaders exited from prostitution and trafficking.
Yeah.
We represent the majority, and we people need to recognize that, and our voices need to be. That's why I'm on medical leave right now for knee replacement surgery. I am a civilian with law enforcement. We can't talk about the specifics of that because I am on medical leave, but I see up close and personal the pain of those who you'll never get on a radio or a television or
Right.
media of any type. So we represent the majority, those who want to exit, those who want a different way to meet their basic needs. And we cannot build policy on the backs of those who are vulnerable, who are coming from a position of poverty, homelessness, and violence. For me, I entered the sex trade as a victim of domestic violence, running from that domestic violence, which is sometimes the way that other women enter. When you run from home and you end up on the street, it becomes, and when you couple that with a drug addiction, that's one of the ways that many people enter, is running from the violence in the home, and you end up, absorbed and swallowed up in the cesspool and the hedonism of the streets. And prostitution becomes a way to feed the drug habit that is masking the pain, right? Or if you weren't on drugs when you hit the street, or you end up in even if you're high end or in a brothel or in a strip club, some women begin using drugs to be able to numb themselves.
You need the drugs to medicate the pain.
10, 20, 30. It's absolutely, this is not what God intended. 10, 20, 30 times a day to have sex, to be exploited and used by for someone's pleasure. That's not the way that things should be. And there's so many treaties and different things on a global level that are idealistic that don't trickle down into everyday life. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's why you have people who are trying to pass laws that really are not built on what's base for humanity.
So, Dr. Hatcher, let me, because this is happening more and more across the country, and a lot of our listeners are citizen activists or legislators or whatnot, so they're involved in a lot of that policy. I want to make sure they get the two big points here. You've given so much good information today, and I'm going to ask you for places to send people to before we get off. But the two things that I really hope people get, number one is when you see those images of that testimony and someone saying, hey, people ought to just be able to do whatever they want with their body. That is a small percentage, 2%.
That's correct.
Of those in the trade. The 98% are saying, get me out of this. And when you make it legal, it makes it harder to get people out of it, because that's the
correct.
Second main point. You made this great economic argument saying, look, everywhere where we've legalized these things, it hasn't made it better. It's made it worse because it increases the demand, and that ends up causing more of the sex trafficking and other things to happen.
That's right.
Am I getting that right?
That's absolutely right. I mean, you stated it absolutely perfectly. And I just want to also say, because I know we don't have a lot of time today, that the equality model also proceeds from an understanding that prostitution, gender-based violence, and racial disparity, because the majority of those in domestic sex trafficking in this country are brown and black women, who it makes sense because guess what? They're the ones who you would think would be more likely to be, and statistically we know that, poverty, homelessness, right? And so this is a cycle of something that society needs to break, but not by legalizing it, not by decriminalizing it, right? And then let's look at it like it. Their ideological framework is that somehow prostitution is labor, right?
Yeah, they're arguing that, hey, we're just providing a service just like anybody else.
Yeah. Or it's a consequence of some immorality with the female species, which is, just not so. So we want to bring the dignity and respect back to this human rights violation, which means that, and I guess I'll leave you with this last statement from me, which I believe wholeheartedly, that consent cannot be bought. It is not for sale. Human beings are priceless as God intended for them to be, male or female.
Yeah.
Or however
Amen.
they identify their sexuality.
Amen. That's good. So Dr. Hatcher, the best place, you're involved with several organizations. What would you recommend for our listeners if they want to be able to combat this in their communities? What's a good resource for them or organization to participate with?
Well, we're going to have the Equality Model website will be up soon, but right now they can go to World Without Exploitation website, and contact Lauren Hirsch, the national director, and then anybody that wants to reach out to me as you did, which I'm so grateful. They can reach out to World Without Exploitation and National Director Lauren Hirsch.
Excellent. We'll have a link today at wallbuilderslive.com. Worldwithoutexploitation.org is the website to get to. Dr. Hatcher, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate you coming on today.
Thanks for having me. Take care.
Stay with us, folks. We'll be right back with David and Tim Barton.
Hi friends, this is Tim Barton of WallBuilders. This is a time when most Americans don't know much about American history or even heroes of the faith, and I know oftentimes for parents, we're trying to find good content for our kids to read, and if you remember back to the Bible, to the book of Hebrews, it has the Faith Hall of Fame where they outlined the leaders of faith that had gone before them. Well, this is something that as Americans, we really want to go back and outline some of these heroes, not just of American history, but heroes of Christianity and our faith as well. I want to let you know about some biographical sketches we have available on our website. One is called the Courageous Leaders Collection. And this collection includes people like Abigail Adams, Abraham Lincoln, Francis Scott Key, George Washington Carver, Susanna Wesley, even the Wright brothers. And there's a second collection called Heroes of History. In this collection, you'll read about people like Benjamin Franklin or Christopher Columbus, Daniel Boone, George Washington, Harriet Tubman. Friends, the list goes on and on. This is a great collection for your young person to have and read, and it's a providential view of American and Christian history. This is available at wallbuilders.com. That's www.wallbuilders.com.
We're back here on WallBuilders Live. Thanks for staying with us. Special thanks to the Reverend Dr. Marion Hatcher for joining us today on this subject as well. Back with David and Tim. So I didn't realize that the D.C. effort had already been defeated, so that's good news. But it sounds like it's still, the effort has moved to other states and other cities that are trying to do the same thing. Obviously, California would be trying to lead the way in places like San Francisco. But man, I mean, it just makes absolute sense that, the people that would be showing up to speak out and the media would cover would be such a small percentage of those that have been harmed and affected from this industry. And I'm so thankful that Dr. Hatcher could come on and make some sense of that.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see where the battles were occurring because she listed a number of places where the battles are happening. And they're all places that are anti-biblical morals. I would like to say they're all blue places, and generally there are, but it's not just because they're blue. I mean, there's a lot of folks on the Republican side that are very libertarian on morals, that this would be no problem for them. And so anywhere there's an anti-biblical morality, whether it's Republican or Democrat, you're going to get problems. And I thought the point she made was really good, that crime begets crime. Wherever this has happened, organized crime grows. Not just, what I was talking about at the first part, where crime in communities around, but organized crime grows, drug grows, illegal gun activity grows. I thought, it makes a lot of sense. It's created an atmosphere where this stuff really thrives. And the other thing she said that was really pretty shocking to me was that only 2% of those in the sex industry want to be there. I was really surprised at that. And, she had economic reasons, others.
Well, and she makes a really good point that no child growing up thinks, what I want to be when I grow up? Somebody working in that industry. That's no ambition anybody has as a child. And generally there's a lot of hurt, there's a lot of pain, there's a lot of broken relationships, various things that often lead people to those situations. Dad, even as you mentioned, that when you kind of look at the demographic of cities that embrace this, even politically, that it certainly does seem to be much more of a liberal policy, which tends to be much more of one side politically than the other. But even as you mentioned libertarians, one of the libertarian arguments is, well, I think it's totally fine. Well, not all libertarians even feel that way, because some libertarians would say, well, I don't think it's good, but I don't think constitutionally we can tell people they can't do what they want. And here's where there's even that breakdown sometimes in more conservative leaning or libertarian leaning communities, because it's not that those people support necessarily that behavior, but if you look at a culture and society, what government's supposed to do is protect its citizens. And when you look at protecting citizens, when you allow people to do certain behavior, knowing that there's going to be certain ripples that come from that behavior, and those ripples are incredibly damaging to people, well, then you have to ask, okay, so when does it become the interest of the federal government, whose primary job is to protect the rights of the people, when does it become their job to step in to protect the rights of the people that are being abused by the free choices other individuals are making? And that was one of the things that was long understood, that when we don't have a standard of morality that we're following, and we say people can do whatever they feel, whatever they want, if you're adults, it's fine, we used to consider what ripples is that going to cause and how will that impact others. And this is one of the many, many reasons that part of this sex industry is a problem, is not just the immediate impact it has on consenting adults, but how that those decisions, behaviors, and policies impact the surrounding community in very damaging ways.
It's a surprise how much of an effort has been taking place across the country to legalize prostitution. The only way you stop things like that is by being involved, by being a positive voice. And so we ask all of our listeners out there today to think about what they can do in their community, whether it's this issue or another issue. We ask you to take a biblical worldview, apply that to your issue so you know you're on the right side, you're taking the right position in being a good biblical citizen in modern America today. But that you then take action, that you take that information, and once you have that correct position, that then you look for ways to influence your community and state and nation. There's so many different ways you can do that. We love to teach people about how to do that. We do so in our Constitution class and our biblical citizenship classes. You can find out how to be a Constitution coach in your local community and do that by going to constitutioncoach.com and host the class that David and I recorded at Independence Hall for the Constitution portion, and then in the WallBuilders library, and all kinds of great materials brought into that. You can also use our Foundations of Freedom television program. That's available on our website at wallbuilders.com, as well as a ton of other books and videos and various materials that you can use right there in your community to be a force multiplier, to be the catalyst for restoring biblical and constitutional principles right there in your neighborhood. Thanks for being an active citizen. Thanks for listening today. You've been listening to WallBuilders Live.
We stand undivided, forever